The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd, because it was the middle of the night. Now this is a response to Havetopraiseyou. He made a very nice video, everybody should go see it, where he had the Qur'an being read in Quranic style, plus he shows the words in Arabic as it's being read, plus he gives a literal translation of each word. I'm not sure taking the literal translation means anything, because when you try to translate, taking the literal translation often gives you the wrong meaning of the words, of the sentence. So I'm not sure the literal translation can be taken to mean much at all. But anyway, my only suggestion perhaps is that the phonetics of the word is shown too, so that we can more easily hear each word as it's being read, since we're not accustomed to hearing Arabic, much less Arabic being read in the Quranic style. Now he gives 3 reasons that the Qur'an says the earth is spherical. In a text he also says another reason. And he tries to defuse one of the arguments of people normally bring up about the earth being flat in the Qur'an. Well, in the text he says to me, talking about the distance between east and west, this suggests really that they're on the extremities of the earth, and thus the spherical interpretation, because it is emphasizing such a huge distance. That's a logical fallacy, because you can have a large disk just as easily as you can have a large sphere. Having a big distance doesn't give you another dimension. You've got north, south, east, and west. The distance between the two is, it's a certain distance, and it could be whatever how big the disk is. You say it talks about a diameter, well, I say it talks about a diameter too. Although if it's metaphorical, you can say the distance between east and west. Well, it's not a real distance. It's just metaphorical, saying that it's a really big distance. It's like saying the distance between up and down. But if you say north and south, we know where those points are. But if you say east and west, well, it's not exactly clear where east and west are. Those aren't really points. So I think it matches a flat earth better than a spherical one. Rather than just a spherical, I think it matches pretty much just a flat one. Alright, you say that the Qur'an says a cower, which means to wrap around, therefore the day and night wrap around the earth. And you talk about, like the surface of the earth is the day and night. Well, they back then thought that the day and night was this dome that went over us, and that the night was the thing that covers the day, and the day is the thing that unravels the night. And if you remember the picture that I showed you last time, it clearly shows that somebody, at least back then, thought that the night was this big dome that went over us that contained all the stars. It even shows this guy that's kind of humorously sticking his head out and seeing everything behind this dome, because of course he went to the edge of the earth and had this little journey of his. Well, anyway, so that's why this a cower, I think, is right, because they're talking about a sphere, the sphere around the earth, not the surface of the earth. So anyway, there's a picture proving my point. Now you also say that you can't have any east. You can't have east unless the earth is round or spherical. So if you remember my last video, I had 2 east. You said that was a reasonable interpretation. But if you have many east, more than just 2, you have to have a spherical earth. I knew about the many east before I made my video. I didn't bring it up because we was only talking about that one verse. In that video, he was talking about the creation, and he was boasting about the seasons, which, of course, was defined by the extremities. So which favors of the earth will you deny? He was talking about creating the seasons, and which, of course, was represented by the motion of the sun. Now, the sun rising in 2 different places was, of course, very important back then, to at least talk about philosophically, because if you assume a geocentric universe, it's very unusual. So they thought this was this great sign from God that he was, giving us the seasons. However, in the rest of the Qur'an, he talks about many east, Lord of the many east, Lord of the many west. Well, this is simply the places the sun rises and sets in between those 2 extremities. Since he's not boasting about it anymore, he's talking about the whole thing as a whole, all the days. And of course, there are 365 divided by 2 places the sun rises. And then, of course, it comes back the other half of the time. So I looked it up, and as a matter of fact, there's the text. Although some people said that this guy was just making up things. So if he says the prophet said, we don't really know the prophet said it. Tabari, Volume 1, page 234. Then the prophet said, the sun and the moon, Allah created the east and the west on the 2 sides of the earth, and the two rims of heaven. There were 180 springs of the west of black clay. And this is why Allah says he found the sun setting in the muddy spring. The black clay bubbles and boils like a pot when it boils furiously. That's important. So 180 springs. Who cares about the springs? But it was 180 going up, 180 coming back. You may say, well, that's not 365. What happened to the other 5? Well, they didn't keep their years based on the solar year. They kept it based on a lunar year. They had 12 cycles of the moon, which made up an entire year, which is why they have 11 days fewer days in the year than we do. That's why their holidays come 11 days earlier every year. As a matter of fact, you should read up on it. Muhammad said that we can't add this extra month to try to make the year match with the season because it's messing with Allah's creation, which is essentially like saying that we can't add a leap year. So anyway, a muddy spring. This is translations of found for it. If anybody just wants to argue that point, black, muddy, or hot water, a black sea, a muddy spring, a vast ocean, a warm source of water, a black sea again, a pool of murky water, a spring of murky water. Basically, it can mean just about anything. A black sea, it could mean the Black Sea, but this idea of hot runs all the way through it. And that brings me to my next point. He talks about Dhul-Qarnayn going to the edge of the earth, or he says it's not the edge of the earth. He says he just goes to the setting of the sun. Although if you ask the traveler, where did you go, he's not going to say, I went to where the sun set. It doesn't make any sense to say that. You can say, I went to the east, which is perhaps what he meant. I don't know. But I'm going to show that it's most likely he went to the edge of the earth. So he followed until the day to reach the rising of the sun. He found upon it a people of whom we had not appointed any veil to shade them from it. So he came across the people when the sun was setting. Is that what you said? Anyway, definitely don't think it means the time. It could mean east, though. So anyway, there's a Christian legend. This Dhul-Qarnayn, I was reading about it, and it means dual horns. So I was thinking, why would you have this strange guy talking about dual horns? When I was researching a flat earth, I came upon Alexander the Great having this adventure to the edge of the earth. And guess what? He was called dual horns also. Two horns. So there's a Christian legend about him. The episode of the building of the gate against the Gog and Magog is found in the Christian legend of Alexander. Let's see, that was not written later than AD 251. The Qur'an, of course, was written 100 years later. Well, what does it say about this? Well, Alexander the Great, supposedly, in this Christian legend, went to the edge of the earth when these people were living there, and the sun would come right up over the hills, and it would burn them, so they all had to run into the caves. All the animals and birds also had to run into caves so that they would live. And there's also complaining about the Gog and Magog, which were creating all this havoc. So they asked Alexander the Great, or two horns, to build this great wall of iron. They believed that there was a ring of mountains around the earth, and the Gog and Magog lived around the outside, and there's this gap in the mountains. So Alexander the Great told them to build and he helped them build this great iron gate between the mountains to keep them out. And according to legend, at the end of the world, at the end of time, when the apocalypse, the gate's going to break down and Gog and Magog's going to flood into the earth and cause more havoc. So anyway, it seems to match the Quranic story of two horns also. Some people say it's Cyrus. I also think that the Quran intended Cyrus to be two horns also. However, when they heard the legend of two horns doing all this stuff from the Christian legend, they assumed that it was Cyrus, and when in fact the Christians actually thought that it was Alexander the Great. But they all called him two horns, so the legends got mixed up. So it's mostly from the legend of Alexander, but I think that the people were actually talking about Cyrus. So hopefully I've shown you that a flat earth is still consistent with the Quran, perhaps even more consistent, especially from the extremities of east and west, and that it's a very interesting legend about Alexander the Great and the Christian legend. You ought to read up on that legend, and then read up in the account giving in the Quran about two horns going and seeing the Gog and Magog.